What are you getting at, Benjamin?
I think it's time for me to become the villain.
In my opinion, Captain Benjamin Sisko is one of the best officers in Starfleet. He's the most realistic captain we've seen in the Trek universe, capable of portraying genuine human reactions while still upholding the ideals of the Federation. But there's something else about him that stands out, something darker, something that makes me think Sisko may actually be a Section 31 agent. Let's just get into it.
Our official designation is Section 31. Never heard of it. We keep a low profile. Works out better that way for all concerned.
Section 31 is a shadowy, clandestine organization that operates within the Federation. While it still believes in the core ideals of Starfleet, its methods are far more questionable. Extortion, espionage, murder, and manipulating allies for the greater good are all in their playbook. Think of them as the Federation's version of the operative from Firefly. Their mantra is simple: the ends justify the means. And when you look at Sisko, well, his actions often seem to line up with that philosophy. Let's look at some of the moments that make this theory not as crazy as it might seem.
Containment failure in 3 minutes.
I'm gonna get your mom. You're gonna be okay.
Sisko's tragic past played a big role in shaping the man he became. He grew up with the ideals of the Federation, but his experiences in the universe, especially losing his wife, showed him the hard truth. The Federation's vision of a perfect future looked good on paper, but it didn't stand up to the complexities of reality, and that forced Sisko to adapt, to bend the rules when necessary, and to make hard decisions. Not evil decisions per se, but certainly anti-hero choices. Take For the Uniform, for example.
To all the members of the Maquis Resistance, this is Captain Sisko of the USS Defiant. In response to the Maquis' use of biogenic weapons in their recent attacks, I'm about to take the following action. In exactly 1 hour, I will detonate 2 quantum torpedoes that will scatter trilithium resin into the atmosphere of Solosus 3. I thereby will make the planet uninhabitable to all human life for the next 50 years.
Sisko embarks on a vendetta against Eddington, using weapons of mass destruction that could displace civilians or probably kill them. Then there's the Paradise Lost arc, where Sisko imposes sweeping security measures. He goes so far that he even curbs civil rights. He does things like curfews, mandatory blood tests, and troops on the street. And don't forget In the Pale Moonlight, where Sisko brokers a dangerous deal involving biogenic gel, detains someone illegally, and is complicit in the murder of a Romulan senator, several innocent security officers, and the person I just mentioned. These aren't the actions of a typical Starfleet captain, and they certainly have more in common with Section 31's modus operandi.
Well, it worked. And you'll get what you want. A war between the Romulans and the Dominion. And if your conscience is bothering you, you should soothe it with the knowledge that you may have just saved the entire Alpha Quadrant, and all it cost was the life of 1 Romulan senator, 1 criminal, and the self-respect of 1 Starfleet officer. I don't know about you, but I'd call that a bargain.
But taking that aside, let's look at the big picture of DS9. Because when you connect the dots, this theory begins to seem more plausible than you might think.
I have been fighting for Bajoran independence since I was old enough to pick up a phaser. We finally drive the Cardassians out, and what do our new leaders do? They call up the Federation and invite them right in.
The Federation is only here to
Help us. Yes, I know. The Cardassians said the same thing 60 years ago.
From Episode 1, there's a key question. Why was Sisko chosen to command Deep Space Nine? Bajor was a politically sensitive post. It was a recently liberated world, and Starfleet had to ensure it didn't fall back into Cardassian hands. Not to mention, Bajor's potential membership in the Federation was a priority. Sisko wasn't exactly in the best place when he was assigned to this post. He was a broken man, considering leaving Starfleet entirely after the death of his wife. Why would Starfleet, let alone Section 31, want someone like that in such a high-profile role? Could it be that Section 31 saw potential in manipulating a capable officer who is vulnerable and disillusioned with the Federation? Perhaps they knew Sisko's emotional state would make him more malleable, and in return, they gave him the command of Deep Space Nine as a part of a larger plan. And then there's the wormhole. When it was discovered, Sisko became the emissary, a religious figure to the Bajorans. His role became central to the control of the wormhole, which had significant political and strategic value. A Section 31 agent in charge of this would be ideal for maintaining control over such a critical asset. And honestly, what if they already knew about the wormhole? Could Section 31 have been aware of the potential strategic importance of the Gamma Quadrant and the Dominion long before the Federation did? They arguably would have had the technology and means to know about such things, so it's not really out of the scope of their abilities. And let's talk about his influence. Sisko is not just any captain. He managed to acquire the USS Defiant, a heavily armed warship for his own use. This wasn't a typical perk for a Starfleet officer commanding what was effectively a backwater station. And yet, Sisko had it. This, along with his well-connected nature, raises questions. Why did Starfleet allow this? Why did they trust Sisko with such power? Unless he had a very, very large benefactor. But all of this, of course, is just circumstantial. Where's the actual evidence? Well, there are a few key moments that make this theory harder to ignore. First, consider Bashir. Section 31 makes its first big move when they kidnap Bashir in order to put him on trial. They bypass DS9's security, and when they're done, it seems like both Sisko and Odo had absolutely no idea. You're telling me that Deep Space Nine was not able to detect Section 31. Remember, Deep Space Nine was right next to the wormhole where the Dominion was. The Dominion, which was known for infiltrating enemy governments. The security on the station would have had to have been phenomenal, and somehow they got by. While it's possible they were able to do it on their own, it would be much easier if the commander was in on the job. Ultimately, Bashir is tortured, and then, when he's found innocent, was encouraged to join Section 31. He was offered a job. When Bashir tells Sisko about it and wants to expose Section 31, Sisko states that he went to Starfleet and they just brushed it aside. We'll take Sisko at his word, even though we know he can lie, and just assume that he did in fact tell Starfleet. That said, what is Sisko's next move? Well, he encourages Bashir to join Section 31. And what if all of this was to plan? Now, Sisko knew Bashir wasn't a spy for the Dominion, but what if Sisko's true goal in all of this was to get Bashir involved with the organization? Maybe this was the plan all along. By recruiting Bashir, they'd have someone inside who could later be used for their purposes, and it worked. Bashir was later sent on a covert mission for Section 31, still believing that he was trying to dismantle them from within, but ultimately just being a convenient fool.
That's the spirit, so never say die.
What an odd expression. What does it mean?
It's a line from an old Earth poem. Forgive me for interrupting.
Speaking of that, we have Inter Arma Silent Legis, where Bashir is sent to Romulus for a medical conference. But what's really going on in this? Sloan is there orchestrating things behind the scene, and who's not to say that Sisko wasn't involved? After all, Sisko isn't exactly against killing Romulans when it suits his purposes. What if Sisko and Sloan had collaborated to manipulate Admiral Ross and use Bashir as a pawn in this much larger game? You have to admit that, again, Sisko, knowing that Section 31 was going to use Bashir, was really just seemingly incompetent in keeping an eye on him to ensure that Section 31 didn't do anything malevolent. And then there's the matter of Odo's disease. Sisko authorizes Level 9 security clearance for Bashir to research the cure, which is extremely high for someone of his rank. But the results are faked. Is it possible Sisko himself made sure that Bashir would receive those faked results to protect the secret about Odo's condition? It's a small but suspicious detail in a larger web of actions that, when examined, seem calculated rather than incidental. Not to mention that when both Bashir and O'Brien wanted to go after Sloan, Sisko specifically ordered them not to. We're led to believe that this is because they didn't want to worry about the fallout, that there was much bigger things that they had to worry about, but what if he was protecting one of his colleagues? In fact, when you take a look at Sisko's role in Section 31, he is either incompetent, passive, or had to be working for them. It is the only explanation for his character's actions.
And I do have a solution, but it will not be easy.
You do whatever it takes, Mr. Worf. Those Klingon ships out there are the only thing between us and the Breen. Gowron is risking the safety of the entire Alpha Quadrant, and he has to stop.
Finally, let's touch on Sisko's role in Gowron's death. In the episode Tacking into the Wind, Sisko orders Worf to kill Gowron. This decision isn't just tactical, it's political. If Sisko was working for Section 31, this would be the perfect move to manipulate Klingon politics, ensuring that Martok, who would become more favorable to the Federation, was installed as a chancellor. It's kind of the calculated move Section 31 would endorse. So, is there direct evidence that Sisko was part of Section 31? No, not exactly. But when you look at the totality of his actions and decisions, it starts to make sense. Sisko was a man who understood the complexities of the universe. He saw that the Federation's ideals weren't enough to protect it. Maybe that's why he was willing to take the darker path when needed. Of course, these are just my thoughts. What do you think? Did Sisko really work for Section 31? Let's keep theorizing in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Lore Reloaded.